All right, we're going to try this again because I ran out of memory. So we're going to make this fast. Also, Cleo has joined us. Look at her. She got a haircut. She looks so pretty. We're going to talk about the the Hail Mary play for Dark Horse with Indiana Jones. This is Indiana Jones and the Tomb of the Gods. And this is written by Rob Williams with inks by Nathan Massengill, line art by Bart Sears and Randy Elliott, colors by Michael Attier, letters by Michael Heisler, and yeah, we're going to talk about Tomb of the Gods. Indiana Jones is tasked with stopping the Nazis from finding this tomb that will change the face of the earth, basically. It's a weird thing. The less I say about it, the better. But this thing, it's more of a quest to find this comic at this point than actually reading it. Because this thing was short printed, I'll tell you what. When I went through the Dark Horse stuff back in the summer, I assumed this was collected in the omnibuses. I was gravely mistaken because they came out at the same time this did. This came out in 2009 and was only printed once. Because Indiana Jones, George Lucas wanted a forced renaissance of Indiana Jones to tie into Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And they really pushed Indiana Jones for about a year and a half, and it went under the rug. And it's a shame. But this, it has some things going for it. It's Indy right before Raiders, so we get between Temple of Doom and Raiders Indy. Okay, that's cool. We get a little mix of both, what people really like to see, and I'm glad it doesn't take place during the Marvel comics. It seems to be before he goes after the Ark. So that's interesting in and of itself, but unfortunately, it's a weird story. Out of all of these tie-ins, because there were some weird tie-ins with Cleo. I love you too, but you're in the middle of my review here. Out of all these weird tie-ins with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, this is the most Kingdom of the Crystal Skull-esque. The MacGuffin is just bizarre. Yeah. I won't get into it because, quite frankly, they don't really get into it, which is just kind of the big thing that makes this story fall apart is that they're going after this tomb and we know next to nothing about it. Except for there's like this amulet that's broken into three parts that if you combine them like Voltron, you'll open the tomb. The Nazis have two of them, and then Indy has one, and it's a struggle with them. Kind of like how it keeps switching hands, like the Ark does in Raiders. That's kind of what you're going for there. I don't know. Marcus doesn't act like Marcus should for Raiders. He acts more like Last Crusade Marcus, which doesn't quite work for me. He's acting a little too senile. I expect him to act more like novel Marcus does, where, yeah, he has his moments of goofiness, but there aren't that many of them. And in this, Marcus is wearing a goofy hat all the time, and it's like forced goofiness, and I didn't care for it. It's fine. But this was supposed to be the big thing because the Star Wars comics through Dark Horse were just blowing up right now. And they're like, oh, well, if Star Wars works, Indiana Jones should work. Which they should never do that, but like George Lucas always did this. And it's so frustrating as an Indiana Jones fan that he would just throw Indiana Jones out there as much as Star Wars because they're two very different IPs. And Indiana Jones doesn't work on a scale that Star Wars does. Nothing works on a scale like Star Wars does. Hell, Star Wars now doesn't work on a scale that Star Wars once did. That's lightning in a bottle. You're not going to get that again, you know? It's just a shame. Because we got Tomb of the Gods. We got the 2 digest-sized Indiana Jones Adventures comics. And on top of that, Scholastic published 2 Indiana Jones YA books, which are different than the young Indiana Jones YA books that came out in the 90s. At some point, I'll have to review those. That'll be interesting to see what they did with that. Del Rey released a novel called Army of the Dead. It was written by Steve Perry, which was infamously bad. I've heard it's one of the worst Indiana Jones books. I have not read it. But based on what I've seen, like excerpts I've seen, it's not very good. In fact, it was so bad they didn't bother to release the novelization for the game Staff of Kings by Rob McGregor, like the quintessential Indiana Jones author. They never released his book, which I think is a crying shame. But heck, let's get into Staff of Kings. They never released the main game of it. In fact, they took the assets of it and they threw it in Force Unleashed. So we had the AAA game only came out on Wii, PlayStation 2, DS, and PSP, the lesser systems of the time. Indiana Jones just imploded in 2009. It just did. It was really sad. They really forced it. They had probably the best toy line Indiana Jones ever got. I mean, the toys were kind of all over the place, but if you know anything about Indiana Jones toys, it's been a cursed IP. An absolute cursed IP with like the Kenner toys where you couldn't find Indy or Marion anywhere, or the Temple of Doom line where they didn't release half the figures, period. Or how about Last Crusade didn't even have a toy line? Isn't that wild? Like, fan favorite of the Indiana Jones movies doesn't have a toy line. So Kingdom of the Crystal Skull got, like, the best toy line out of all of them. And they just made bizarre choices with it. And imploded that to the point where the Temple of Doom toys came out to Walgreens. Yeah. The best figures. Literally considered by most collectors to be the best Indiana Jones figures. Came out exclusively for, like, Walgreens and CVS. Like, drugstore toys. How sad. How sad. It's a shame. So, with that being said, this book represents more of an era rather than its own story. What would I rank this? A 2.9 out of 5. It's not quite middle of the road. It's a little worse than middle of the road. With that being said, the art in this, and this is the irony of it, the art is probably the most consistent Dark Horse Indiana Jones art I've ever seen. I'm serious. It doesn't feel dated. It feels modern and contemporary. At times a bit sloppy, if I'm being completely honest, but this thing feels rushed in general. So, hey, the art being as consistent as it is a plus. But the story, there's barely story. Like, there's nothing to this. The Golden Fleece had more story, and it was half the issues of this. I'm serious. It's a weird oddball. Yeah, that's a double entendre there. Weird oddball. It's just the strangest comic, and it was very limited in its release. So finding this, you're gonna pay a pretty penny for it. I paid much more than cover price, which on this is 13 quid. Yeah. I imported this from the UK. I'm serious. Although this is technically an American release, the seller was from the UK. I had to import it when I bought it on eBay. I couldn't find an American copy. You can find, I'll tell you what, you can find the single issue comics at an okay price. But finding this trade paperback, or in the UK, they released all the single issues in like weird little hardcovers. Those are expensive. So it's not the end of the world if you don't have this one. It doesn't really reference anything else. So anyway, have a good one.